I think God tried to put me in that path long before I actually was paying attention. The first recollection of Bruce, honestly, is it must have been 75 because I step out of Friendly's Ice Cream in Chelmsford, senior in high school, and Billy Martin's standing there, and he goes, "Check this out," and he shows me Time magazine. He goes, "Bruce Springsteen's on the cover of Time magazine," and I'm in my head going, what exactly is a Bruce Springsteen and why should I care? And so we like, okay, great, good for you. I'm glad you're happy, Bill. And walked away. And then further on, I'm living out in California. I have a friend who's going to the University of California, Davis. I go spend a weekend in the dorms with him, and his friend's playing this Born to Run album, and kind of in the background, I'm like, who is that? That's pretty good, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And again, not paying attention. And then come back from the Army, and my friend Jimmy, I'm going to Rhode Island School of Photography at the time, now defunct, not Rhode Island School of Design, that's a real school. And my friend Jimmy O'Laughlin says, "Hey, you're living in Providence, Springsteen's playing at the Civic Center, and I got a ticket for you. Can we crash at your place?" And I'm like, "How much is the ticket?" He's like, $15. I'm like, "Oh, geez, $15." But I thought, it's a chance to see my friend Jim, and like, okay, come on down. Bruce Springsteen, Born to Run. Can't understand half the words he says anyway. So yeah, I'll go just to see him, just to see Jimmy.
Yeah.
And so he shows up with five guys. We go to Springsteen, and when you see people talk about their first Billy Graham revival meeting and how they found Jesus and were touched by the Lord, and all that stuff that I've never had on a religious level like that. I got it. I think the only song I really knew any words to were "For You" at the time, and I saw someone play from the floor to the top of the highest speaker, just B to the W, all out, I am here for you. You matter. He knew Dave Decker had never been to a show, and he wanted to make sure I personally had a good experience. I mean, that's what it felt like. It was touched by an angel, and I was, it was Bye Bye, Carpenters and Donnie and Marie, and we were airborne.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson, and joining me today is another Springsteen fan that is a friend of a friend. This is a referral podcast. Dave Decker, welcome to the show, Dave.
Thanks, Jesse. Great to be here.
Yeah, so tell us a little about yourself.
I happen to be working for Sunrun, which is the largest residential home installer in the country. So we're saving the planet, saving people money, all that good stuff. By night, I do stand-up comedy, and I've been a Springsteen fan since I'm going to say 1980, 81.
What's the question you get the most that you're tired of hearing when you tell someone you do stand-up?
They always try to give you, "Oh, you know what happened to me at my office the other day? Somebody was at the coffee maker and they farted and everybody like ran away. Like, you should tell that on stage." I'm like, "Well, no, that's not my story. Like, it's not funny to me. It's not my personal experience." But they want you to take what they think is funny and try to tell the rest of the world about it, and that's very hard to do.
Yeah,
Comedy is very personal.
Yeah, it really is, and I can imagine they have a good heart, but it just isn't the same thing, right?
Right. Or they'll tell you that joke that you've heard 3,000 times. So then, three Jews walk into a bar. Oh, here we go. I know this one, and
Yes.
so.
That's good. Yeah, I was always thinking like oh, good, well, be funny. Okay, yeah, I will. Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
just be
yeah.
funny
Tell
on
me a joke.
command.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Tell me a joke. You're funny. Like, no.
No, I'm not. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
hilarious.
Spend
Um,
$20 and get on, for a
yeah.
CD, and
How you been doing during the pandemic?
comedy wise, let's.
Or just life
Oh,
wise?
just
I
in
was gonna say,
general.
speaking of funny, let's talk
Yes.
about the world pandemic.
How about all those dead people? Um, uh, Pandemic wise hasn't been bad. I like moved into a new town and everything in the middle of pandemic, so like I'm still waiting to go out and explore it and meet most of my neighbors and all that stuff. So that was a little weird, but I had COVID for like a week. I had one symptom. I had a nagging cough, and that was it. No temperature, no nothing else. So I can't say I had COVID in that tragic, horrible sense that a lot of people went through. But that was fine, and our business is being out there visiting homeowners, so that was shut down for a while. So that was hard. But now we're really an essential business because we're providing electricity, and so we've been back out there, and so all in all it's been pretty good. It's kind of allowed me to just kind of regroup and focus on getting this new place together and all that good stuff. So
Yeah, we mentioned a little bit before we hit record. You said, "Oh, Texas, you've gone through a rough one." I guess you're very like uh, the experience of us having rolling blackouts and not having power must hit home to you.
absolutely. I mean, our company alone had a 350% increase in calls from Texas about solar and backup battery power with solar. I think people are starting to realize that, some of the infrastructure that we've had for 100 years is not going to be reliable going forward. So yes, it's been a big boon to the business, but it's not. To me, it's not capitalizing on a tragedy. It's the goal should be that this. If 80% of people in Texas had solar and backup battery power, that situation would have been a lot better, for everyone. For their safety, for their health, for their warmth, all of that, and that's true everywhere you go. No matter what part of the country, you're always open to disruption.
Yeah, because this is one of those things where, you know, um, you're locking the barn door after the horse has been stolen. Why I'm buying another horse, right?
Right.
And I know that's a cliche, but the reality is, um, it was very it was very weird, and I understood a little bit when we only get these kind of winter storms every 10 years, and so it is. I understand them putting their money into infrastructure to with the Texas heat because summers are very hot here, but it was weird. I am nowhere near a hospital. I am nowhere near a fire station, and I never lost power. My son's apartment complex is literally across the street from a fire station, and he lost power. But and they were trying to say, oh, we're the reason why is we're trying to make, and I just don't think they knew what the hell they were doing. It just no craziness.
And you also
Well,
have the only unregulated grid in the country, so
well, yeah, and we there there's a lot I love. I grew up in Louisiana, or my dad was in the army. We moved around a lot, but I've lived in Texas since '86, and there's a lot to be said
oh sure.
that I love about the state. But there is um, this arrogance um, that I think is unwise. Like there's an East Coast grid, a West Coast grid, and there's Texas because
Yep.
we don't want to be involved with that.
That's
You
right.
understand this, Dave?
We
We,
want those $17,000 bills to come after a problem.
yeah, and because we're Texas and we don't put beans in our chili, and we have our guns on the gun rack in our pickups, and and it just seems sometimes like we're just that we're just stupid. But anyway,
Well,
moving on.
I spent 2 summers in Alaska, and when you're up there, they talk about you people in the U.S., and I'm like, wait a minute, let me count the stars on the flag again. Aren't we all in this together? It's very different.
I bet that is. I bet that's really interesting. All right, talk about growing up. Where did you grow up, and what kind of music did your family listen to?
I grew up in Lowell, Massachusetts, the birthplace of Jack Kerouac and the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution in America. But it was like everything back in the 60s and 70s, a dying little mill town, not too far reminiscent from Springsteen's my hometown. And then we moved to Chelmsford, which was a suburb nearby when I was 9 and all that. But growing up, country music. My father dominated, the record player. He was the man in the gray flannel suit, a banker. I don't think he's ever been on a horse, but he just loved everything country. I mean, old school, so I grew up listening to Sons of the Pioneers, Eddie Arnold, Loretta Lynn, Charlie Pride, on and on and on. And, that was, and I didn't like it. I found it like twangy and nasal impaired, and I didn't understand it. And of course, I didn't want to understand anything. No teenager wants to understand anything his father does. You just want to rebel. And so that was pretty much the soundtrack. My mother really didn't. She loved Engelbert Humperdinck. So if she ever played anything, that was the only thing I got to listen to at home. And Tom Jones. I did like Tom Jones.
We similar background. My dad loved, Hank Williams and Merle Haggard and absolutely Eddie Albert and Glenn Campbell.
Yep.
As he became more popular, obviously my dad adored Willie Nelson.
Yep.
And and Johnny Cash and
yeah.
And so there were. I've told the story a couple of times. I remember being in Ohio with my cousins on my dad's side, and they were a typical, teenage, and this must have been 68, maybe 67, and I could not name all 4 Beatles because that was not something that we listened to in my house. I mean,
in the 90s, I worked with a high school student who worked at a photography studio, and I asked her to name the 4 Beatles, and she said, "There's Paul McCartney and that guy that got shot," and I almost started crying.
Yes.
But,
yeah. Oh.
Yep.
Oh, Amber Alert.
Something I said?
Amber Alert on my phone. So,
okay.
Yes. Make a note at 9:12 at 12 minutes, edit out Amber Alert.
I'm curious, is this a visual thing or just a conversation?
I will this will just be a conversation.
Okay, because I don't want to turn my head or whatever.
No. Yeah, you did not turn on your camera. At the very bottom, you see there is a start video. At the Zoom, there says mute, stop video.
Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah, I didn't do that. Okay.
Yeah, if you click that, then you can see me and I can see you.
Okay.
There we go, Dave. All right.
Hey, look at that.
Hey, there we go. Yes, and no, this is just audio. So yeah,
all right, cool.
That's good. Yeah, so I'm right there with you. And country music was all the station we listened to in the car.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just what I grew up.
We didn't have country music stations in New England.
Yes.
That was not
I guess. Yeah.
But yeah, I know what you're saying, and I'll try to make the story as quick as possible.
No. We're good.
Through a connection of a connection, I ended up at a photography seminar in Nashville, Tennessee, and the couple running it called me at my hotel and said, "Hey, you want to come out to dinner? And we're going to have dinner with Connie Smith. I had no idea who Connie Smith was. And we're going to go backstage at the Grand Ole Opry." And I thought, maybe that's a club called Backstage at the Grand Ole Opry. So I go, and I'm now having dinner with some country star named Connie Smith. And then she takes us all backstage at the Grand Ole Opry, and there's more rhinestones than I've ever seen in my life. And I'm next to Porter Wagner and Little Jimmy Pickens and people I didn't care about. It would be the equivalent of my dad bumping into like Steve Van Zandt backstage or Clarence and not giving a hoot as to who these humans were. And so I called my dad. He didn't sleep that night. He was so giddy. So my dad had cancer a few years later, and they were going to Nashville, and I played the cancer card, and I called these people. I said, my dad has cancer and he loves country music. Oh, have him get. They took my dad and my uncle, who his only brother, who sings country music and plays country music. They took them both graciously backstage at the Grand Ole Opry. They were singing with in the dressing room at the Sons of the San Joaquin. They met all these people. It's the reason I was born. It's the reason my father had me. I mean, like I will never, like, you know, in my time on the planet, not, you know, I could cure cancer or whatever, this would still be bigger. So
That's a lovely story.
yeah.
I'm laughing. Um, my wife was in Cleveland for a conference several years ago, and she said, "Yeah, they're they're filming some kind of film. I think it's called The Avengers, and I think like somebody named." Is there a Scarlett Johansson in this film? We
No.
saw her. She's so tiny. I'm like, what? 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 Have you seen Josh Whedon? And this is before Josh Whedon, the stories all about
Yeah.
his, back then it was okay to like Josh Whedon.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
and so it was the same thing, and so me and my buddies were like, oh, that's wasted on your wife. Like she has never seen one. She saw the original Iron Man. She went with my birthday. That's the only Marvel universe she'd
Oh
seen.
my God. Oh,
Yeah,
that's fun.
so that's great.
That's funny. I've been an extra in 6 movies, so I have been in the vicinity of greatness, but you're not allowed to touch or talk to greatness. So,
Um, does that get you an IMDb? Uh,
uh, you could pay for your own IMDb and put
mm,
that up there, but I mean, I have in 6 films 8.5 seconds of screen time, in the
okay.
background, so it's not worth it.
The reason I am asking is, fast forward, we're going to the movie theater for the debut of Western Stars. It's going to
Yeah.
be at the movie theater. And so it was me and my wife, her sister and her sister's husband that, we got married in the same summer. So, you know, Clayton and I have been brothers since '84. I mean, we have been in each other's lives. And
Yeah.
so the four of us we go to Western Stars and we're enjoying it. And Linda reaches over and whispers, "Are you jealous of the people in the barn, watching?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm so jealous to do
Oh,
that."
absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
and then at the end, they list their names in the credits.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my goodness, you not only got to go to the show, but you actually got a credit on forever. You're listed. I am so jealous. I am so jealous. And I know it
Oh,
was ended up being like cousins and friends of Bruce and Patty's. So, but it still was like, oh wow, I would love to have been there that night.
oh, that was just lush. Like, that was like a night would musically, I think you would never want to end. That was
Yeah.
just it's intimate is the word. Yeah.
You know, the thing people have asked about, and before Broadway, I had always said that I would love to have heard the the private concert he did for the White House staff at the end of President Obama's term. But then we've now heard that is he turned it into the Broadway show. But at the time, I thought wow, that would be so cool to hear him do that. So Dave, um, you've grown up with Eddie Arnold, and I assume Jim Reeves and all these other people for the good
Yeah.
times. Um,
Patsy Cline.
yes. When did you discover rock and roll?
Um, that's a good question. I was never, I'll be honest, I was never like, you have talked to my friend Jim Laughlin, who has like 9 million records, was a DJ, just, he's a musical, just, guru. And I was just more like, oh, what's on the radio? Oh, the Carpenters, whatever. Like, I never like really was seeking out my own music. I
Yeah.
had a brother 2 years older than me, so there was some things that he was listening to that, at like when I was 12, frightened me. Like, what is this Led Zeppelin thing? This doesn't sound right. But yet I was like starting to connect with things like Cream and Vanilla Fudge, the Zombies. Of course, everyone loved the Beatles. That was just, the Rolling Stones and Jimi Hendrix. My brother, like kind of influenced me. Iron Butterfly, the entire 18-minute Inagata Vita, just blew my mind. So those were things that kind of were influences, but I wasn't really like music. Also, this was the 70s, and the biggest driving force in music was the 50s. You had Happy Days and Let the Good Times Roll and American Graffiti. And so I
Sha
really
Na
enjoyed
Na was
Sha
big.
Na Na. I have the K-Tel album still, I think.
Yeah.
Golden Age of Rock and Roll. And so all of the music I was really loving, growing up in high school and stuff, was from 20 years earlier, because that was like such a big influence. And but the first concert I ever went to, ninth grade, at the Garden, Three Dog Night, and Boston Garden, and like I'd never experienced anything like that in my life. Like, the whole place went dark. Everyone lit lighters because no one had iPhones then, and then like the stage was still dark, and all you heard was Jeremiah was a bullfrog, boom, and the lights went on, and it was the greatest like crowd experience I've ever had.
Mine was Foghat and
Awesome.
ZZ Top.
Oh, that's a good combo.
There may have been the scent of strange cigarettes in the air, because this is like in 75.
Well, that can't be possible because those weren't legal then.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
The and it was, yeah, I graduated high school in 77. So I'm right in your era
Yep.
where, the AM radio was just, I had the little AM clock radio next to my bed. You turn that on if if you're in your room, and that's just whatever they played is what you played.
Yep.
Whatever you heard.
Yeah, I wasn't seeking out music. I did have a friend, like around that time and beyond, still a friend, Ken, who would come from this club called the Paradise and go, I just saw this band called Blondie. You're gonna have to check them out. I'm like, what's a Blondie? I just saw this guy named Meatloaf. You are going to have to see this. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna go see anybody named Meatloaf. That's going nowhere. I saw this band called U2. Like he was seeing everybody at this shitty club. I'm sorry. And
No.
That, before anybody like,
Mhm.
that I, in my world, knew.
That's
he was a good influence too.
Yeah.
Elvis Costello. What's an Elvis Costello?
Yeah. What when did you discover Bruce?
Well, it's funny. I think God tried to put me in that path long before I actually was paying attention. The first recollection of Bruce, honestly, is it must have been 75 because I stepped out of Friendly's Ice Cream in Chelmsford, senior in high school, and Billy Martin's standing there, and he goes, "Check this out," and he shows me Time magazine. He goes, "Bruce Springsteen's on the cover of Time magazine," and I'm in my head going, what exactly is a Bruce Springsteen and why should I care? And so we like, okay, great, good for you. I'm glad you're happy, Bill. And walked away. And then further on, I'm living out in California. I have a friend who's going to University of California, Davis. I go spend a weekend in the dorms with him, and his friend's playing this Born to Run album, and kind of in the background, I'm like, who is that? That's pretty good,
Mm-hmm.
And again, not paying attention. And then come back from the Army, and my friend Jimmy, I'm going to Rhode Island School of Photography at the time, now defunct, not Rhode Island School of Design, that's a real school. And my friend Jimmy O'Laughlin says, hey, you're living in Providence, Springsteen's playing at the Civic Center, and I got a ticket for you. Can we crash at your place? And I'm like, how much is the ticket? He's like, $15. I'm like, oh, geez, $15. But I thought, it's a chance to see my friend Jim. And like, okay, come on down. Bruce Springsteen, Born to Run. Can't understand half the words he says anyway. So yeah, I'll go just to see him, just to see Jimmy.
Yeah.
And so he shows up with five guys. We go to Springsteen, and when you see people talk about their first Billy Graham revival meeting and how they found Jesus and were touched by the Lord and all that stuff that I've never had on a religious level like that. I got it. I think the only song I really knew any words to were For You at the time. And I saw someone play from the floor to the top of the highest speaker, just B to the W, all out, I am here for you. You matter. He knew Dave Decker had never been to a show, and he wanted to make sure I personally had a good experience. I mean, that's what it felt like. It was touched by an angel, and I was, it was bye bye Carpenters and Donnie and Marie, and we were airborne. So
Uh, I often say that I think there's two kinds of people: the people that go to their first Bruce show and go, "Wow, that was long," and then the ones that say, "Oh my goodness, this is, I now want to see him live anytime I can. How do I
yes.
get more of this?"
And
Um,
tragically for every other artist, I judge all live performance by Bruce. And it's kind of not fair, but you know,
yes.
if you take away all Springsteen shows, I have maybe 5 great musical experiences like that.
Yeah, I remember I had I had we went and saw James Taylor,
Mm.
and great. I mean, it was a good show,
Cool.
but 90 minutes, he's over, and I'm looking over at Linda. I'm like, I'm not saying he's mailing it in, but I'm saying he's mailing it in.
Yeah.
Um,
I waited too long to see Aerosmith. Same thing at a casino. We were down. I'm gonna finally see Aerosmith, and it was like, walk this way, $1 million. Janie's got a gun, $2 million. Can we go now? And
yeah,
it's just, oh God, I hate you.
yeah. We and the and you it is hard not to um like I have gone to, like, one of my top concert memories was during the late 80s or early 90s when Linda Ronstadt had just
Oh yeah,
and Aaron Neville
yeah.
had that album where they had some duets
Oh yeah,
together.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
Neville brothers opened,
Yeah.
and then Linda came out and sang all her
Oh,
hits, and then had Aaron Neville come with her. And that was, what a great experience, right? Because I had never seen the Neville brothers before, and, and they were a lot of fun.
that's
And to
right.
hear them together, and her voice was just amazing.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, you are, um, you, you, and, um, and you start to appreciate more. Like a few years ago, John Hyatt was at House of Blues
Mhm.
acoustically, and you knew he kind of had a rough set that he was thinking about doing, but it was just him and his guitar. And if he's like, let me try something different. And, that was a great experience
Yeah.
because it felt spontaneous. Even if
Right.
it wasn't 4 hours, I think that's one of the things that my son and I, um, speaking of country, Brad Paisley, my son and I are both big Brad Paisley fans, and we go, it's the same show almost year after year. He just throws in a couple of new songs, and
Yeah.
it's just, in fact, my wife went one year and then the next year, and she's like, it was the exact same show.
Yeah.
Like, okay, if my wife notices, you know,
Yeah.
it's not good.
No, no, you're absolutely right. And I know people like, oh, I saw Sting 3 nights in a row, and it was the exact same show. I'm like, or the Police or whatever.
Mhm.
And I'm preaching at the choir that there
Yeah.
has never been a DNA match on any Springsteen show ever.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the closest was when he was doing the River Tour,
Yeah.
in 2016. But even then the second half after he did the full River, he mixed it up and did different songs.
Yeah.
Um, do You've kind of explained a little bit, but I'm going to give you another chance to expand on. Can you put into words why he captivated you? Why that music, you know, you
Um,
became a fan, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you've become passionate slash obsessed with his music.
but yeah, I have to, like, when people say, like, start talking about Springsteen, I have to realize, okay, you know, like, they really probably don't care about everything you want to tell them, like, you know, um, so I guess part of it maybe is a little mystical in the fact that, like, I never understood my father's connection to country music. I didn't get it, and I'm not putting country music down. I just, you know, it didn't resonate with me. More now when I listen back, I go, yeah, I get that. Obviously Hank Williams and the influences on Bruce, etc. But I never understood it, and he never felt the need to explain it. And I'm kind of in that. Not that I'm not going to answer your question, but like, people go, oh, I hate Bruce. I now think, great, one more chance for me to get a seat.
Yes.
I don't need to bring you to church, because the pew is full. I mean, the church is full. I want to make sure I get a seat, a good seat. But it has been, it sounds cliche to say a soundtrack of my life, but his music, his characters, his story, the stories he's telling, it's John Steinbeck in scale, my favorite author, probably from living out in Salinas area in California, Monterey Bay, became my favorite author. And it's a John Ford Western. It has, everything is like, you're not singing about the girl, you're singing about something bigger, like The Rising was about so much bigger than just the moment.
Yeah.
And he was able to pull people like, my dad wasn't a Springsteen fan, but he really loved the line in Youngstown about how our guns, the big guns,
Yeah.
I'm not getting it right, couldn't do what Hitler's boys couldn't do. Having been
Yeah.
in World War II in the Battle of Belgium, he loved that. After my father passed, not long after The Rising, I played that album for my mother, and, Missing,
Mhm.
was what she was experiencing.
Sure.
My dad's coffee cup, his shirt, his chair, all that there,
Yes.
a big hole in the sky. And so she actually got that album, or we got it for her. I can't remember. But so he has always seemed to be in the right place in the right time emotionally for me as I grow, as he's grown. He's now singing songs looking back in thank you for, love and friendship, and, what's coming forward and where I am and being at peace. And I'm 63, and that's, I'd like to think I have 40 good years left, but, so his arc of his story and his characters have been moving with me. I'm not singing, it's awkward now to go, to sing, she's 16, she's beautiful, and she's mine. Like that doesn't,
Yeah.
if that resonates with you at 63, you need to have a bracelet on your ankle.
Yes. Yes.
But his characters have grown, even
Mhm.
even when he reinvents and he goes back and sings Born to Run as a 70-year-old man, you can feel it's different.
Yes.
It's like if you've ever heard Judy Garland live at Carnegie Hall when she sings Over the Rainbow, it's 60 years of heartbreak and pain,
Yes.
and as opposed to a naive young little girl singing a beautiful song of hope.
Yeah, and like one of the things that I was I didn't I Independence Day didn't connect to me. Just it was a fine song, but nothing. And
Yep.
then when I saw him do it live, and I realized at this point, he's in his late 60s, and that he was probably older than his father was when he wrote this. And he
Yeah.
is now singing this song from the perspective of the father. He's had that experience now where he was trying to talk to his children. And no
Yes.
matter how close you are to your children, there is that at times a barrier, at
Right.
least through parts of their lives. My son is 31, and he lives in Dallas with us, and he has his own apartment. And he called me up Friday, and he says, hey, he was supposed to come over last night and just hang together because he hadn't seen us. And he says, hey, can I extend my Airbnb reservation? I come up on Friday and I spend the weekend with you guys. I'm like, sure. And and just he's like, I hadn't seen you guys. I need to get out of the house. And so that's a beautiful moment. But there were times when he was 15 or 16, eh, we just couldn't talk to each other.
That's the
And so,
nature of it, though.
yeah,
You're
it
trying to,
is.
you know,
Yeah.
you, your parents don't know crap, and
Yeah.
you are a fully formed adult and know everything, and then you don't need them.
Yeah. And as he used to say, he still says young and dumb. I
Yeah.
was young and dumb, Dad.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I absolutely agree. And, you mentioned um, his, his works and, Steinbeck, like, I feel like Western Stars is almost a collection of Elmore Leonard short stories,
Yeah.
like from the the guy who wrote the books that Justified are based on and everything. They're just, it has that feel,
Yeah.
and it's amazing. You mentioned seeing him live the first time, and that was your road to Damascus,
Yeah.
right? Like, ah.
Yeah.
Um, I always like to preface this question, Dave, that the amount of times you've seen him is not a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are.
Right.
A lot of it is your age, your economic situation, your
Sure.
geographic location. If you grew up in Jersey or Philly or New York, and you were of concert going age in '70s, there's a good chance you've seen him, you know, um, triple digits just because you could.
Right.
But do you count and how many times you've seen him?
I need to go back and count. I'm going to say hovering in the 50 range.
Okay.
You know, um, I'm a latent Springsteen lover because,
Yes.
I jumped on the River Tour. My brother has a friend. Oh yeah, Springsteen. I saw him in '72 I was going to college in Rhode Island. There were like 300 people there. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
That was impossible. But yeah, or the people that were at the bottom line, or all of these,
Yeah.
so yeah, so I'm somewhere around 50, and I've been saying 40, and my wife tells me like it's more than that. I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna say 50 now. But
So if you want to, and I recommend it to go down a rabbit hole, there's a website called myBossTime.com. And if you go, you create a free account, and then he has every tour and every show on every tour. And
oh,
so
that's
if you
awesome.
go, oh yeah, I was there. And then behind the scenes, it does all the calculation for you, and it will tell you, oh, you've seen Born to Run X amount of times. This is the
Oh, that's
song you've
awesome.
seen the least. Here are, these are the tour debuts you've seen. These are, and then there's rarities. And like, I was there in Pittsburgh. Um, and where he did Rebel Rebel right after Bowie had died.
Oh
So
yeah,
that's on my list of rarities because he's
right,
not played
right,
that very often.
right.
So yeah. Um, any memorable, they're all memorable, but any stories from the road or concerts you want to share, stories to tell?
Um, One was this was the Devils and Dust tour, which
Okay.
was a smaller, not quite Tom Joad bleak
Yeah.
tour. And I was trying to get tickets, and suddenly I look, and this is Ticketmaster time, and it says front row one, and my arms went numb.
Yeah.
And I said to my wife, listen, like, oh my God, what does that say? Front row. She said, get out of my way. Boom. And I had a better seat than John Kerry
Oh,
that night.
nice.
So that was cool. I think Jimmy often told you about the time we met him and stalked him at the Four Seasons Hotel. I don't even
I
remember.
do not know, so please share.
Okay. So again, pre-internet, this is the Non-E Street Band Tour, the other Springsteen band tour
Yeah.
in 92-ish, somewhere around there. And we said, we got to try to meet Bruce. And people always think, who don't know Bruce, think I wanted to meet Bruce because I want to touch him and, have his baby. And, it was just a matter of I wanted to, at one point in my life, say thank you. Like,
Yes.
and I know he gets this all the time.
Right.
It's like I met Bobby Orr and I said, thank you for all of the wonderful memories you brought to Boston hockey. And he graciously looked at me like I'm the first person that ever said it to him. And, and he hears it 5 times a day, just buying
Yeah.
groceries, and so I wanted to just say thank you. That's all. But the music meant a lot, and it was important, and it's added something of value to my life. So the local radio station said, well, we can't tell you where Springsteen's staying, but we can give you a clue. He's at the Frankie Valley Motel. And I'm sitting there going, Frankie Valley Motel. Frankie Valley and the Four Seasons. He's staying at the Four Seasons. He's at the Four Seasons Boston. Boom. So I called Jim. Boom. We go down, dressed relatively nice because it's a swanky hotel. And we walk into the lobby and we get in the elevator and the door shuts. And Jimmy often turns to me and goes, what do we do now? I go, I have no idea. This was the plan. We're now inside a darkened elevator and I don't know. So we hit every floor, every button, and wandered around the halls thinking he's going to come out in his pajamas or something. And, look. And nothing. So he likes to work out. We went to the gym, and one of the girls was Crystal. There were two singers, a couple backup singers that he had on that tour, and we said hi to them, got their autographs, and we're just hoping to meet Bruce. We're not crazy, And like all I know, she said, all I know is that we're supposed to be at the band at 4:00 outside in front of the hotel. That's all I can tell you. So like, yes. So we go down and we said, oh, if we act like we belong here, we're fine. So we go down, we're hanging out in the lobby, reading the paper and stuff. And Peter Wolf comes in, pulls up right in front of his Saab convertible and jumps in the elevator and think, oh, if I was in that elevator, I would know what floor.
Yeah.
So then it had been a while. Jimmy Laughlin now has to go move the car because the meter's expired. And some very well-dressed gentleman comes over and, sir, you've been sitting here for a while. May I help you? And so I started lying. I'm like, oh, I'm here to see my friend Rich Giraldi. He's up at the next floor at the function upstairs. And Rich Giraldi is a name I pulled out of high school. And he goes, oh, why don't we go find your friend? I'm like, oh, damn it. So we're walking up these stairs, and I'm like, I gotta come clean because otherwise, they're gonna make an announcement. And I said, well, I'm really not looking for Rich Giraldi. I was just hoping to meet Springsteen. And, he goes, oh, we're playing games, are we? He goes, well, you can do those on the streets. Let me escort you. And I was like, very nicely. It wasn't like thuggery. It was just like very classy, like, get your ass on the curb. And so Jimmy Laughlin comes back. I'm standing outside. He's like, what are you doing outside? I'm like, we can't go back in. He's like, what?
We got busted.
We got busted. And then, so sure enough, a couple gray vans, passenger vans, there with no markings on them and all, and some of the band members come. It wasn't the full E Street Band, which I had met several of those people on the Born to Run tour, Clarence and Max and a few others, and so the Crystal comes out and she walks by us. She recognizes it. She goes, here he comes, here he comes, here he comes. I'm like under her breath, and she gets in her van, and then that band pulls off with the band, and Bruce and Patty come out. And they get in like the sliding door, and my friend Jimmy Laughlin like steps up, and I go to step up, and this like arm came down, this like man the size of a tree, 5 times bigger than Clarence. And like I was like, oh. I look up, he goes, we'll get to meet him, relax. I'm like, okay, like And so Jimmy Laughlin got an autograph, and thank God he was there. I mean, because I love sharing this experience with him. B, he's the only one that brought photographs to autograph. I didn't even think of that. And so I go in and, I said, hi, Bruce, I just wanted to say thank you. Your music means a lot. And he's like, oh, yeah, I appreciate that very much. Like he had never heard that before. And he said, who's it to? And I, oh my God, Bruce Springsteen's asking me a question. And I almost grabbed my wallet to find out who I was, because I couldn't remember my name, And I'm like, Dave, oh, let's go, Dave. Hey, thanks for coming, and I'm glad you joined the show, whatever, And very nice, very gracious. And they went off, and Jimmy Laughlin just standing there, like, like Scarlett Johansson had just asked us to go on a blind date or something, like, and I think we just drove home in silence. I don't think we didn't know what to say. So that was my big experience.
Other one, yes. Okay. No, I was going to ask, did you go to a book signing?
No, I never made it to a book signing. I forget why. Maybe because I had the autograph.
Okay.
And although I looked at it recently, it's right up there, and boy, that autograph is getting pretty faded over the years.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to try to meet him again. Jimmy Laughlin, I actually did the pilgrimage to Asbury Park when he was living down there with, wasn't Patty, it was the first wife, Julianne.
Yeah, Julianne Phillips, yeah.
And we actually found his house, and I walked up to the door and knocked on the door with in my head saying, it was okay for him to jump the fence of Graceland. It's going to be okay for me to knock on his door.
That was your argument. You're going to go, hey.
That was my argument. Yeah. That was my argument for the police, for his security people as they tasered me, for whatever in my way. And nobody answered the door. And
yeah, that's hilarious. All right. So I interrupt you. What's your second story?
The second story real quick is, this was Tunnel of Love tour. It opened in Worcester, again, pre-internet and all that days. And, I ended up on the streets in February, like walking, for hours, tickets, what do you got, tickets, and back when everybody had hard copies of tickets and nothing. And God, that I remember that first, because everybody went, Madonna was at the show, and, it's like the first, it was the first night of the tour. And when I could hear from the outside, the first opening chords of Tunnel of Love, I just started crying, like I'm out here and freezing my ass off. So ended up having a long conversation with one of the security guys on one of the side doors. And like, come on, I just stand on the side, whatever,
Yeah.
And
Slip me in, Joe. I'll make it up to you sometime.
yeah,
I mean, you are literally,
like I'm the
yes.
only one, trying to work this deal,
Yes, yeah, exactly.
You know what? He goes, I think I can get one of his harmonicas. And I'm like, oh my God, you're kidding. I'll pay you for it. So he comes out, he gives me a harmonica that he says is King's harmonica. And
Yeah.
I give him $20. Now, please don't tell me what you're going to tell me, that he probably had a box of 40 of them.
I'm not. Yes.
Yeah. But I now, to this day, believe I have Bruce's DNA. I have this harmonica, and
Yes.
there's no, probably not true, but I'm gonna hang on.
That's yes. I want to believe that about that person too, that they would not be that cynical. But yes, I get that. That's pretty funny. Did you go to Broadway?
I did not. We tried, and all the contests and all the,
Yeah.
I never went to stand out and see if I could get will call and whatever.
Yeah.
Life, and and besides, what was it? $1,000 a ticket or what? I mean,
Yeah.
it was like, but watching it, makes you think, yeah, that's a moment I really, would have sold the kidney for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to go. I was not planning to go. I knew I couldn't afford it, and I knew that there was no way I could get it anyway, right?
Right.
And so at the time, there was a brouhaha, because there always is, on Facebook about people having the gall to go to more than one show. There's so many of us wanting to go to Broadway. How dare you go to multiple shows?
Yeah.
And I made the argument that I still stand is valid, is there are only so many lottery tickets available every show, but the same person complaining will try to get in the lottery and get elbows on the stage every time they can.
Right.
Oh, it's different. No, it's an experience that's very unique, being, hey, your stomach hitting the stage, and you will do that every time, and you don't care if no one else has that experience.
Right.
So
7 billion people on the planet, and you
Yeah.
seem to think that you can take up all those spots.
yeah, so why are you judging someone who's lucky enough to get more than one chance to go to Broadway?
Fair enough.
And so someone, DM'd me on Facebook Messenger, just said, hey, you mentioned you're not going. Why aren't you going? And I'm like, well, one, I don't think I can. One, I know I can't get a ticket. Two, I don't think I can afford it. And he says,
But
no,
you
I can get you a ticket.
What?
He says, I've gotten plenty of people tickets. I know you do the podcast. I can get you a ticket. How much are you willing to spend? Like, I don't know. So he says, well, and so he mentions a couple of dates, and it wasn't the top price, but it was the middle price. So I want to say right at $700 or something. So then I got to go to my wife, and go, hey, Linda, how are you doing? I'm fine. Okay, I need to talk. And I said, you know, how sometimes we have a discussion and we're really not asking permission, but we're just kind of telling the other one what we're going to do, and we want them to be okay with it. I said, in this case, I really am asking your permission. I don't want you to think you have to say yes. She goes, well, what the fuck are you talking about? I just told you not to cuss, and here I am. And so I tell her what's going on. And she's like, oh, wow. I don't know how I can tell you no. I'm like, no, you can, She goes, well, let's talk about it. And so we did. We debated on it. We figured out. Um, she was very concerned that I had someplace to sleep. She didn't want me flying into New York, and wandering around an airport all night, trying to be. So we end up finding a package deal where it was a direct flight on American, and you got one of those little bitty pod hotels where you basically
Yeah,
had a cruise ship room.
right. The bed and the toilet are the same thing. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, and so we went, and I forever grateful for her because she's like, this is a once a lifetime experience.
Yeah.
I want you to go and have fun. And so yes, I was very blessed
That's
that
awesome.
she let me, go.
And without
Um,
telling her, in your head was, if we stayed another night, maybe. Um,
yeah, and it was great. I flew in, and what
uh,
was really nice too is Bella Pori, who's been on the podcast multiple times, lives in New York, and she took the train in from her borough and met me for dinner. And so I got to have dinner with Bella, and we got to catch up and talk. We had never met in person, and then took pictures and then went to the show and flew home. And it was just something amazing. So, yeah.
that's fantastic. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Um,
I was looking at your shirt, and I want to,
yeah.
you want to feel old. My shirt, for those that
Yeah.
can't see, is green, and it says "Gut Bruce" with the question mark.
Yeah.
Uh, playing with the gut milk commercial,
Yeah.
and I'm walking into a grocery store. Some 16, 17-year-old kid goes, "Hey, great shirt!" And I'm thinking, "Wow, like the kid this young got it." I said, "You really like it?" He goes, "Yeah, Gut Bruce Banner, right? Green, the Incredible Hulk." And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, you
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
You nailed
Yeah.
it."
That's it. You got it.
I'm
Great
gonna go buy
job.
groceries now and hate myself.
No,
But
that's funny. Um, what were your thoughts about, we mentioned a little bit, but um Western Stars and Letter to You, and I guess specifically, kind of talk about both. But what were your thoughts on these
um,
latest releases?
I'll be honest that, like, on Letter to You, I like to really truly immerse myself in an album, and I haven't taken the time to do that one yet. And it's kind of like I have it up on my mantle to remind me, like, oh, I need to, like, take the time, go through the lyrics, absorb it, and I just so I truly haven't done that. What I have heard, I really like, and I want to embrace that album more and more. So so I'm a little embarrassed on that one. Letter to You, I mean, Western Stars, I really liked that. I thought the movie was just lush and well filmed, and you know, I you know, Bruce doesn't seem out of place to me as a Jersey boy because, as he talks about in, driving through the desert, with Tinker, just had that moment in the desert where that landscape resonated with him, and he's always now, he's brought it into his songs, and especially Tom Joad and those type of things. So him in that environment, he's on a ranch, he lives in a ranch in New Jersey, so I felt comfortable seeing him in that environment, and I loved that album. I loved the there's a lushness to it, I guess, or something. There's a richness. It's it's still part of the same story, Uh,
I I imagine it would be of interesting if your dad was still here to have him listen to it with you.
yes. Oh, especially with the word Western in it,
Yes.
he would
Well,
dive
and
right on it.
as I talked about, my parents loved Glenn Campbell, and
Yeah,
so the Jimmy Webb experience, and to hear that version of him, I think your father would have like, wow, this is kind of cool.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
He dabbled a little bit there, with like Youngstown, he liked
mhm.
that, and I think I played him some of Nebraska because that was very Hank Williams esque,
Yes, it is.
Um,
Yes,
and I don't know, I mean, he didn't like, oh yeah, I love this stuff,
yeah,
it wasn't country, it wasn't pure
no,
country.
exactly,
He would
yes,
have not liked Shania Twain and
yeah,
Paisley probably because
yeah,
he was strictly, there was a
no,
cutoff point in his mind where country began and
mhm.
ended, and So yeah, but I think he would have truly. You know what? I never thought of that. That's really good. Yeah. Yeah.
Did Have you watched Ken Burns' country music documentary?
I saw a couple episodes. It's on my list of the things to get back to, but that was really good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was really well done, and I
Yeah.
think I think it will. I know that my wife and I loved it, and I felt like I was getting a love letter to my parents.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was part of it, and just amazing. Partly because as Burns talks about it in the making of, he said, we always have historians and we have celebrities doing interviews. And this one, we didn't need to use historians as much because the musicians knew all the stories.
Right.
And so they could tell the same story that the historian was, and the added bonus of, um, they pick up a guitar and start strumming as they're telling the story,
Yeah.
so it is, yeah, that's pretty cool.
I'm
um
glad you reminded me. I think in all of the pandemic and everything,
yeah,
it was like one of those things I never got back to, but I just
yeah,
wrote it down. My uncle, my father's brother, who just passed away
yeah,
a couple of years ago now, um, he he played country music all over the area,
yes,
and
uh-huh,
he also was at that Nashville backstage thing when my dad
yes,
was there. But at my dad's funeral, um, at the final thing at the
yeah,
gravesite, he picked up his guitar and played Hank Snow's "One More Ride," and
oh,
I cry when I hear that.
oh, I imagine.
Every February 23rd, I play it.
Yes,
So yeah,
yeah. My dad died on the 10th anniversary of 9/11.
yeah,
Just And so I joke, and pretty serious, I listen to Johnny Cash and The Rising on every 9/11, in memory of
right,
my father, memory of all those we lost on 9/11. So
that's
that's
good.
kind of the twofer that we go. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
Um, all right. Hopefully he's going to tour again.
yeah.
We need live music in our lives again. I'm
This sounds
going to,
pathetic, but I can't imagine a world without Bruce.
no,
I
it,
mean, just maybe the way my parents couldn't imagine a world without Glenn Miller or
yeah,
whatever it was,
right.
Bing Crosby or what Frank
Yeah,
Sinatra. But because he's telling this story and the story's continuing, I I I don't want it to stop.
yeah, exactly. And you're sitting there going, um, this is, and you realize, can they keep doing 4-hour shows? Will they get down to 3-hour shows? Will they get to 2.5-hour shows? They seem to, um, there seems to be a magic of them on stage that
Mm,
somehow they get energy from each other and from the
yeah,
audience, and they go and perform, and they seem to be having a blast.
yeah.
So when they tour, um,
I
so
can't.
it goes without saying, you would love to hear anything from Western Stars and Letter to You. So that's easy. Are there other songs, Dave, that you have chased that you've not heard him perform live that you would love to hear?
There is one that I just love. I think you cannot not feel happy when you hear it, and I've always wanted to hear it played, and I don't think it will now, especially because it's Paradise by the Sea,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
that is just a joyful, one of the most joyful sounds. It's up there with the Seeger sessions of just happy music,
Yes, absolutely.
overall, and I always wanted to just see Clarence Stemmen there just wailing that song and the whole band just being into that love fest for him. And I waited and waited and waited and
Yeah.
but
That's
I mean maybe they would do it with Jake, but
Yeah, it's kind of a tribute. Like if
yeah,
it was close to his birthday or something that they
yeah.
may do that. Yeah,
That
okay.
that's the only one I can think of that like
Okay.
where that's just fun.
Yeah. Um how did you get into, and this is a vague question, but you talked about your day job, but you also, you've gotten into stand up. What
Yeah.
what got you into that, and um what is that a creative part of you that you kind of feed that part of your soul?
Yeah, it's therapy you get paid for, basically. Um, um, when my friend Bill Colbert and I were in high school, we said, one day we're going to do stand up, George Carlin and all that was the rate. And 40 years later, I finally got the cojones to give it a try. And my wife encouraged me, like, yeah, you should give this a shot. And I guess I've never been on drugs, but it's like heroin. You just
Yeah.
can't get off it. You chase that next high that, it's soul crushing. It's the loneliest place you'll ever be when it's not working. And it's the greatest place you'll ever be when it does work. And when I see now, I am not headlining, I do this part-time. So I'm opening,
Sure.
I'm hosting, I'm in the guy in the middle. I'm the guy people at the water cooler say, yeah, we saw Steve Sweeney and there were a couple other guys there. I'm one of those other guys,
Yeah.
And so it's a creative outlet. I've always enjoyed making people laugh. That all psychologically starts with making your mother laugh, and
Sure, absolutely.
every comic will tell you that. And just it's when it's working, it's magic, and I can't, it's the closest on such a small scale. Like when you see Bruce step out, like, even in
Sure.
like I love the 75, 85 set where it starts with, ladies and gentlemen, Bruce Springsteen, you speak band, you hear like, and
Yeah.
then it goes to Born to Run, 1, 2, 1, and you hear like 80,000 people just, and that feeling of being able to like point at 80,000 people and be in control and command. I can't imagine what that feels like inside at that
Right.
level. On a comedy level, when you look around and people are laughing and they are having a good time. Unfortunately, as a comic, you will only notice the one person with their arms crossed who doesn't get it.
Right.
And that's the image you take home. Like, what's wrong with me? Why?
Yes. Yes.
Why couldn't I reach that person?
Yes.
But I love it. It's a thrill. It's a tightrope. It's dangerous.
Do you do any music themed bits?
I do not. Well, actually, I used to do this horrible impression of Bono. That
Okay.
was it was like Bono as a stand-up comic, and it's
Mhm.
so stupid. Like people would laugh some of the time, but it made me laugh every single time doing it.
Yeah.
And I would go into the whole Bono stance, with the arms back and the,
Mhm.
preface it. This is what, imagine Bono as a stand-up comic. It's like, what was the joke? How many children from Rwanda does it take to change a light bulb? Whatever. And then be like, the children of Rwanda cannot change light bulbs because the rebel militia have hacked off their hands with machetes while the world stands by and do nothing. Am I bugging you? Whatever. And it just,
Yeah, that's great.
And then somebody told me, you're really doing like a Ringo Liverpool accent. You're really like, oh, yeah, I probably am.
Right.
Thank you on behalf of the band.
That's great. That's awesome.
Anyway, I haven't done that in a long time, but that's as close to musical as I got.
Okay.
And it's so stupid.
Yeah. Because I've had a couple of people. There is a Daniel Johnson from UK did a series of couple that were the obnoxious Springsteen fans.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I will send you the link. It is,
awesome.
yeah, they really were very funny, and how they're a couple, but there's this unhealthy competition about who knows Bruce the most and things. It was pretty funny. It's good.
Yeah, to me, like I said, I almost don't try to explain it anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe the way that my dad stopped trying to explain country music to people in New England.
Yeah.
It resonates with me. It's passionate. It touches me, and it may not touch you, and that's okay.
Yeah.
If whatever, Billy Joel touches you more, or David Bowie, or that's great. But but unfortunately, people like, you see those people at the shows, they wear the bandanas and and okay, Bruce doesn't do that anymore. You just look like,
Yeah. Yeah.
This isn't an oldie show, you're not dressing up in tie-dye and going to see the dead.
Yeah. So I always like to tell this story because I thought it was so true. I had a guest that we connected via LinkedIn, of all places. LinkedIn, business, Facebook, and basically it's where everyone reaches out to you to try to sell you something. Oh, you run a call center? I have a staffing agency. Oh, you
Yep.
have a call center? I have a CRM. And so
It's like
this,
people want to be my friend who have solar leads available for me.
yes, exactly, yes. And so he had reached out and um, said, "Oh, tell me more about the Springsteen podcast." And I told him, he said, "I love Bruce Springsteen. I will check it out." And I said, "Well, do you want to join me?" And he did. And it was a great discussion. But um, and I'd like your thoughts on this. He said um, he was standing on the floor during one of the reunion shows, listening to the E Street Band back together after the other band, after this, almost 10 years.
Yep.
And he says, I thought to myself, this is it. This is the ultimate thing as a Springsteen fan. We have come full circle. The band is back together. This will never get better than this. He said maybe every few years they'll get together and they'll tour, but this is the height of me as a Springsteen fan. He says, and I wonder going back if I could have told me back then, you've got the Rising coming. You've got the Seeger sessions coming. You've got Magic. You have an autobiography. You have
Oh,
Broadway. You have Western Stars. And oh
yep.
my goodness, at 70, he's doing Letter to You, which is,
And singing in front of the Lincoln Memorial, in front
yeah,
of.
I mean, he said, you, who knew that you were getting that this, you weren't even halfway into his career yet, and that so
Yeah,
many highlights.
yeah,
And I when I think of that, it makes me grateful that how much of we've had in this second, wind of the band in him.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Is that so? The question is, what do I think of that? Or
Or mostly, I'm just telling you a story. There
oh
wasn't a
yeah, okay,
question.
yeah. No, no, no.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. And I think um, uh, you're not going to like the reference, but whenever they ask Tom Brady about
Yeah.
about what's your favorite Super Bowl, he always says it's the next one. And
Yeah.
I still have that mentality. Like I saw the last tour, and he was at Fenway, and he almost beat his world record he missed it by 6 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, and I think like halfway through the show, he wasn't even done with the Wild and the Innocent. Like he was
Yeah.
like, and I'm like, I was like, oh my god, this is just like it gave me chills what he was pouring into that show. And so like you're right. In Providence, I would, I could have thought, well, I'm out, that's
Yeah.
what music's going to get. And then 40 years later, and so what's next?
As a fan, how did you feel about Brady moving on and getting another Super Bowl?
I'm sorry, we have a really bad connection
Oh,
here. Um, it, we're talking about Wayne Brady being on.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's there are things we don't speak of
Okay.
here in New England. No, I mean, good for him.
Yeah.
It should it have happened, and what I mean, sport. We are an angst-driven sports town, regardless of
Yes.
the victories. I'll give you an example. The Super Bowl game, Malcolm Butler's interception, against Seattle, whatever.
Yeah.
I turn on sports radio the next day. We have just won the Super Bowl. And people are calling in going, yeah, it shouldn't have come down to that because in the second quarter, I don't know why Belichick decided to like they're not happy with what happened in the second quarter. They're not like happy we won the Super Bowl. They're breaking
Yes.
down the mistakes that were made that forced us into a situation where Malcolm Butler had to save the day. I mean, that's how miserable we are. Okay.
Well, and
I'm happy,
no, yeah, I'm always curious because um in Dallas, It has been so long since we have been relevant as a football team.
My dad loved
And
the Cowboys, America's team. Tom
right.
Landry. Oh my God, he
And my wife asked the question, why are they still the America's team? And I asked her, I said, you know, what's the best part of waking up? And she says, Folgers in your cup. I said, do you know how many years it's been since that commercial was live? Was on.
yeah,
I said, but it's part of the psyche. So that's why it's America's team. It's just, you know,
right. The
um,
cheerleaders were part of like
yeah,
the persona of the team, the
yeah,
the winning, the Landry, the glory,
yeah.
But you're right, yeah, yeah.
And
Uh,
so my son is a huge sports fan. He is quick to tell you he was born in 1989, but during Landry was still coached then.
wow.
Jerry didn't buy the team till a couple weeks after he was born. So he says, I'm a Landry baby. And, um, so he barely had sports consciousness. He barely had consciousness during those Aikman Super Bowls. And so he has just spent his, the past 25, 26 years of just watching them. I just want to get to an NFC championship game, Dad. Like
Yeah.
I just want to get us where we're relevant, so
There are 20-year-olds that don't understand losing here in New England, you
right.
know? Like, and I mean, and I grew up, when they were like 3-7 or what, whatever,
Yeah.
they were, not relevant at all. And I didn't really like football. I was really more of a hockey person. But the last 20 years, we have been so spoiled. Like, honestly, like the start of the season, the discussion would be who we might be playing in the Super Bowl. I mean,
Yes.
you know, like if any, probably everyone in Texas now is going to find me and kill me
No,
because
no,
like,
no.
but that's been our mantra. And this last year, I think we now realize what it's like to be Cleveland and Detroit and all of these other towns that wonder when they're going to get it together.
I remember in 87 or 88, someone called into Norm Hitzkes, he still does sports talk. And they said, well, Norm, so who do you think we're going to play in the playoffs? And Norm goes, I don't know if the Cowboys are going to make the playoffs. This
That's
was
something
toward
that
the end.
like
This was toward the end of the Landry era, right? And there, after 20 straight years of making the playoffs, that wasn't, you don't even debate, right? Yeah.
who are you going to play? Not
Yeah.
if you're going to play,
Yeah.
especially in the AFC East. I mean, it was a joke
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah, exactly. So that's interesting.
I
And
was my first real happy sports memory is Bobby Orr flying through the air. So I jumped on hockey and I spent 40 miserable years waiting for that cup to come back, and so I understand how other sports towns feel by focusing on that sport, but
yeah,
football, we've just been spoiled.
yeah. And actually baseball
Yeah,
for all
baseball.
those, for all those droughts, and
Yeah.
then have actually, yeah. So that's good. That's interesting.
I'm assuming everyone in Texas and every other state just hates New England for sports wise for all of what they've brought to the table for the last 10, 15 years.
What I found interesting is the amount of hate Brady got because of his um, quote unquote support of President Trump. And that was I I've tried to limit my now if a celebrity is very um, it depends on their political leanings. I try to separate it between them, maybe because I don't want someone to be against Bruce because he's so left leaning,
Right.
but I try to be fair to others. I know sometimes they're just jerks on Twitter or social media. And then I go, well, it's because you're a jerk. It's not because you tend to be more conservative. But there was a lot of hate about Brady, more about that than going, and all I do is, from my perspective, I think it's fascinating that someone of his age goes to another team, and yes, it was a good team, but he's able to figure out a way, with this new coach, new system, and win the Super Bowl. I just think good for the old man.
He seems Springsteen-esque in the like, okay, well, this is it.
Yeah.
Even Giselle supposedly said to him, like, at the Super Bowl celebration in Tampa, have you proven enough yet? Or something. That's
Yeah.
supposedly the quote from her, like, and he's thinking like, probably not,
Yeah.
and maybe, people say, hey, Bruce, why don't you just chill and just, write jingles for commercials or whatever. And,
The only time I've gotten really angry is, and more frustrated, I guess, but someone on Facebook tweeted or posted after Letter to You came out that, I wish Bruce would quit putting out new albums because he's tarnishing his reputation.
oh,
And I
good.
went, okay, that's full of crap.
Yeah.
He could put out 10 mediocre albums and he's got nothing to prove. Right.
I mean, it's like Michelangelo. Hey, that's a nice statue. David, love it. Why don't you just,
Yeah.
take up accounting now? No, you can't stop.
Yeah.
Stand-up comedy, I mean, anything where you're pouring a piece of your soul out, you can't, and regardless of whether it's well received or not.
Yeah.
Bruce isn't going, I wonder if Letter to You will work or not.
No, it's got to come out.
Right.
Is there anything I should have asked you, Dave, that I haven't, as I've kept you over an hour, and I apologize.
No, I'm loving it.
Okay.
It's nice to talk about Springsteen and not have people go, okay, we need to step 3 feet away.
I thank you for that, and I will tell you, I'm told that more often than not, that people are like, no, I love talking to someone who wants to talk about this, who gets it.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like people like, oh, I like Springsteen. Like, oh my God. And they're like, well, I went to a show in '84. That was pretty cool. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Well, you had kind of a list of things we might talk about. And one that really surprised me, because I never thought it was a question.
Yeah.
It was about Mary.
Yes. So this is how I end every show.
Okay. Sorry. I didn't mean to.
No. You're good. This is my version of the actor's studio. You know how he would ask these questions at the end of it? That's what my buddy Bob said. He says, man, you've turned into this. So a guy named Jay. Yes, exactly. So Jay Armstrong is a retired English teacher, but for the longest time, he taught English, and specifically honors English, at a school in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. And his senior English class, they would take apart Thunder Road as a poem. They would break down the lyrics. He'd talk about the themes, compare it to Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken, and other classic poems. And then at the end of the 2 days, he would ask the question, does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road? So Dave, that is your question.
And until I heard the question, I never thought it was a question.
Right.
And maybe it's a test of whether you're an optimist or a pessimist. I don't know. I never thought Mary didn't get in that car.
Right.
There is so much, he is making such a case for why she should be in that car that I would have got in the car.
Yes.
And so yes, Mary gets in the car, and honestly, if I close my eyes, it breaks my heart to think that she didn't.
Yeah.
It goes back to, I want to know if love is wild. I want to know if love is real. If Mary doesn't get in the car, then that line isn't true. And I never thought she didn't. I just thought that they took that chance, and not saying it ended happily ever after or anything, but I'm saying she took that chance, and he's making a case that is really not even, it's not sexual, it's longing for another, it's going down that tunnel of love, and I never, until I heard the question, ever thought that she didn't get in that car.
Well, that's a good answer. I appreciate that. And I was glad I could give you different things to think about it. Yeah. Any final thoughts you want to share with me or my audience?
No, this is great. There, like any group, there are crazies on the fringe,
Yes.
And Springsteen groups have them, any group from, whatever you belong to, book club, there can be cult like people that, but the people I have met have seemed to have a level of sincerity, a level of, I don't want to say they're smarter than other people. That's not what I'm trying to say. There's a level of intuition. Like if you get this music, if you get the arc of this story, if you understand the scope and the humanity and the, as Bruce says, the place between the American dream and the American reality that we all struggle with in our souls, in our lives, in our personal lives, in our big picture lives as a country, as a nation. Like if you understand that big, wide, deep breath, then you are a different kind of person than someone that just wants to shut up and sing, play the hits. It's you understand that this is a living, breathing work of art that will continue until he dies, as far as production, but that message will linger. I think it's again, like John Steinbeck. You can read John Steinbeck; he's long gone. Those tales of humanity still resonate, and they're still, those struggles are real. Those
Yeah.
stories are still true. And so when I meet Springsteen people that are into it like that, I just find it's a very different. Well, that's a class of people. It's not a have and have not. It's nice to work with people or talk with people that, like yourself, that have that appreciation of what this work really means, and because most people on the surface just see me as a middle-aged white guy that's trying to rock out and relive his glory days, and no, it has nothing to do with that. This is art, and I am in love with the art, and has nothing to do with the artist.
Yeah, I well said, my friend. And I think, the one of the beauties of doing this podcast now for over 5 years is the diversity of how many people have joined me. I've had people from around the world, people who are our age, to I have a episode coming out this week where I have a 20-year-old and a 16-year-old. The 16-year-old lives in Spain. The 19-year-old lives in New Orleans. They met online. They have developed a great friendship, all out of Bruce's music.
Yeah.
And it is the diversity. And I do find, and I'm biased, but the amount of passion that Springsteen fans have about the music and each other seems to be, and I assume maybe the Grateful Dead has that same kind of view. Maybe
Except they don't
U2.
realize it the next morning.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, it's something really well done. So you mentioned you are very seldom on Twitter, but is there, if someone wants to reach you, how can they?
Facebook is probably the best way to go.
Okay.
I think I've made one tweet, and I think it says this is my first tweet. And that might have been 5 years ago. I would go with Dave Decker Comedy,
Okay.
Facebook, or just find Dave Decker on Facebook, and
Okay.
that's probably the best way to go.
Sounds good. Well, my friend, this was a blast.
Yeah.
I tell you what, after you've done a deep dive in Letter to You, how about come back and we do a discussion on the album?
I'm in.
All right,
Absolutely.
that sounds good.
This has been a
Great.
joy. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Hang tight. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed our conversation. It's always interesting to make a new friend. For now, please remember to social distance. Um, Remember to wash your hands. Remember to wear a mask. Ignore the Texas governor. And let's all be good to each other, because that's the only way we're going to get through this. For now, thank you. Goodbye. We'll talk to you soon. Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlistingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at setlistingbruce, and my personal Twitter is at jessejacksondfw. We have a website, www.setlistingbruce.com. From there, you can find links to other Springsteen podcasts as well as other music-themed podcasts. We have a page devoted to our own SLB All-Star Band. These are guests who have been on the podcast more than 3 times. There is a link to our store where you can purchase Set Listing Bruce shirts, as well as a Mary Question t-shirt. There is a link to our Patreon page where you can sign up to help support the podcast financially. We have different levels and different rewards based on your support. If you don't have any extra cash, and right now, who does? You can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The Set Listing Bruce is part of the Southgate Media podcast group. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.
I thought you were going to end with someday we'll look back on this and it'll all seem funny.
That's not a bad line. I've done different. I've seen you further. I'll see you further down the road.
Yep.
You know, I've
In the land of hopes and dreams.
yeah, I just have never worked out a
Yeah, I
good
know.
catch out. But I think about that.